Well, hello there, Year 11. I hope you are very well indeed. Just thought I would take you through a few things in preparation for your Shakespeare and the English Literary Heritage Control Assessment that is coming up in the near future, depending on when your teacher thinks that you are ready. The question for you is particularly straightforward. It's this: explore the ways in which Shakespeare presents character change in Othello and Romeo and Juliet. And I guess what we're saying to you is character change is absolutely vital to both of these plays. Both of these plays are tragedies, and without a change in character, arguably, the plot would take a very different twist. And I think that's what Shakespeare wanted to get across, that perhaps one of the issues with both Romeo and with Othello is the fact that they change, and the way in which they change, and the implications and effects and the impact that their change have on the play as a whole. So it's absolutely crucial that we look at how we do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through things on this PowerPoint. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's just a guide for you. We do this every year. See what you think. You may find it useful, you may not, but give it a go and see what you think. So I'm going on to the second slide now. And you'll notice on there, here's a guy called Aristotle. Now here's a philosopher. And Aristotle came up with an idea of actually what makes tragedy. What are the component parts of a tragedy? And many different things he came up with. So it's worth in your essays probably thinking about Aristotle, because obviously he's quite important. And he said, I'm on to my third slide now, he said that a tragic character will mistakenly bring about his own downfall. Let me just say that again: mistakenly bring about his own downfall. Now, mistakenly means that they don't know that they're doing it. Obviously, you don't wish to bring about your own downfall. Let's move on to the next slide. And perhaps the character change in Romeo and Othello, perhaps that could be their tragic flaw. Perhaps, and this is the question that you're asking, I guess, is their character change the thing that ultimately kills them? With Othello, for example, he starts off as calm, assured, logical, collected, noble and loving. Remember those first few scenes where we see him? He's got fantastic language, he's got presence, he's got control. But then later on he becomes murderous, rash, ruthless, cold and actually quite common. But by the end, when he realises his fault, he goes back to being that noble chap again. So his character goes on a massive journey. I would suggest to you Othello's character goes full circle, more so than Romeo's. And that's why I think it's possibly, in my view, a better tragedy. I'd like to hear your view on that. Let's move on to the next slide about Romeo. I mean, he starts off as ultimately a melancholic character. He's full of self-loathing at the start of the play. He's very upset that Rosaline has not requited his love. He's numb and he's morose. He doesn't want to be a part of anything. He's isolated from his family, he's isolated from his friends, and we don't really know what he stands for, Romeo. But all of a sudden, as soon as he meets Juliet, there's a mercurial character change. He becomes confident, loving, forward, spontaneous, passionate and playful. Unbelievable change. Really, really is. And then there's, you know, his character change maybe is slightly more complex, goes on a different, probably more extended journey to Othello. When he sees Tybalt, and Tybalt wants to fight him for obvious reasons, for breaking into the party. Romeo is passive, he's peaceful. He doesn't want a duel, which is unheard of. Contextually, that would be unheard of. I think Mercutio says, oh, vile, dishonourable submission. But almost 70 lines later, he actually kills Tybalt. He goes back on what he said, a total kind of polarisation. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Clearly we can see that these changes happen. So this is your job. You've got to explain how Shakespeare presents these changes. And I've kind of broken it down into three aspects for you and see what you think. First of all, what the characters do, so their actions. You know, are there any changes? Are there any differences? Are there any discrepancies in their actions? And I'm sure you'll agree there's absolutely loads. What the characters say, their language changes completely, and also what others say about them. That's a character presentation. So let's move on. Let's actually get into the texts and see what you think. Now, you've studied the texts broadly through your viewing of the films. What we've done for you is we've made sure that the texts you study are the texts that you need. If you'd like to borrow copies of the full text, of course, that's available to you. So let's go to the prologue. Now, let's first of all think about the prologue. Shakespeare needed a prologue. The Globe was raucous. I'd suggest to you that this plot for Shakespeare's audience was labyrinthine. It was very complex, so he needed to make sure his audience knew what was happening. So that's why, many of you ask me, why on earth does he tell us what's going to happen at the start? Well, he probably needed to. But I'm more important with the dramatic technique of the prologue, because by telling us what's going to happen later on, it creates suspense, tension, and straight away we've got audience engagement. We want to know what is going to happen. So this is the prologue. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hand unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured, piteous overthrows do, with their death, bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which, but their children's end, naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. Now the prologue's a sonnet. You'll notice the rhyme scheme. It's got it's written in iambic pentameter. It's got the usual rhyme scheme and structures that happen in there, but I'm interested in the types of words. Let's move forward. The types of words that are in there, that there's, it just shows a chaotic world, really. Dignity versus mutiny, grudge versus civil, fatal versus life, love versus rage. It's clearly, for me, it is a volatile world Shakespeare's predicting here for us. It's unpredictable, it's high octane, and for me, if we look at language, if this prologue is a language analysis, it is an unsettling start. Unquestionably. We don't know what to feel, we don't know what to look for, we know what's going to happen, but we are unsettled by the range of words and the opposing words that go on. Now, I guess the question is it the same in Othello? Well, I would argue that it is the same in Othello. I think it is a very changeable world. It's a raucous start. It starts with Iago, who hates Othello. He absolutely hates this general for a number of reasons. He hates him because he hasn't promoted him to be his officer. He's promoted a guy called Michael Cassio, but he hates him because he thinks that Othello has slept with his wife, and he also hates him out of pure jealousy and bigotry. And it's Iago waking up a Venetian nobleman, Brabantio, because Othello has secretly married Brabantio's daughter. And the start is, there's no way to describe this, it's just incredibly rude, it's base language, it's a volatile, angry world. It says, "Zoon, sir, you are one of those that will not serve God if the devil bid you, because we come to do you service, and you think we are ruffians. You'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse, you'll have your nephews neigh to you, you'll have coursers for cousins, and jennets for Germans." So it's, even the first word there, Zoons, is short for God's wounds. It's blasphemy on every level, and quite frankly, we can see what goes on here. Perhaps by starting with those first words, Shakespeare's audience would have been absolutely horrified by it. But I think also it's incredible base sexual language. You'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. That word "covered," we all know what perhaps that might mean. It's shocking. Iago uses a lot of alliteration. Nephews neigh to you, uses images of, for me it's particularly racist imagery here, that if Desdemona gets pregnant by Othello, then actually their offspring will be animals, not humans. Have your nephews neigh to you. You'll have coursers for cousins and jennets for Germans. Okay, they're different types of horses. So it's dramatic unsettling alliteration, and it goes on. It goes on, and I would suggest to you that both of the openings are particularly unsettling. So if we go on to the initial character presentation, we have Montague talking about his son. This is before we meet him, and he says this. He says, "Many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning dew, adding to clouds more clouds with his deep sighs. But all so soon as the all-cheering sun should in the furthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from the light steals home my heavy son, and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows, locks far daylight out, and makes himself an artificial night. Black and portentous must this humour prove, unless good counsel may the cause remove." Now for me, I find this particularly shocking, because my initial idea about Romeo is that he would be part of the brawl, but clearly he is not. And with the imagery from Montague here suggests that Romeo is melancholic, is depressed. So there's lots of imagery to do with the weather there, clouds, more clouds with his deep sighs. Actually we're told he's shuts up his windows, locks far daylight out. I think that's a metaphor. He's been separating himself, or he's separating himself from the brawl, crikey. But there's, there'd be an expectation in Shakespeare's time that actually, as Montague's son, he would be involved in this brawl with the Capulets, because it was an honourable world. It was a world of chivalry, fighting for one's name. But Romeo doesn't be a part of it. So there's a real change between our initial expectation and the reality of Romeo. Now if we move on to Othello, now remember we expect Othello to be a villain, be a savage man after Iago's speech. We expect him to be a particularly villainous sort of character. Now Shakespeare's audience as well. I mean, they would have been aware of Aaron in Titus Andronicus, and they would expect, and this sounds incredibly racist, but in Shakespeare's time they would expect a black man to be evil. Now just think about the weighting of saying that, and after what Iago said and Brabantio's reaction, it's quite interesting that Othello is totally different to our initial expectations. When Iago says that Brabantio is going to come and attack him, Othello's response is fantastic. This is one of the best speeches in Shakespeare, because straight away our initial expectations are dashed. He says, "Let him do his spite. My services which I have done the Signory shall out-tongue his complaints. 'Tis yet to know, which, when I know that boasting is an honour, I shall promulgate. I fetch my life, and being from men of royal siege, and my demerits may speak unbonneted, to as proud a fortune as this that I have reached. For know, Iago, but that I love the gentle Desdemona, I would not my unhoused free condition put into circumscription and confine for the sea's worth. But look what lights come yond." I mean, straight away we see a guy who is calm, he is confident, he is assured, and he is noble. I love the fact that he says, "Let him do his spite." Straight away, if Brabantio wants to have a go at me, let him try. Because he says, "My services which I've done the Signory shall out-tongue his complaints." He's basically saying, I'm of a higher social status than Brabantio. Anything he says, well, I can get away with because I'm held in such high regard. And we'll later find out that this is true. So, he then goes on to talk about how he's from noble birth. He speaks in a very poetic way, a very calm, logical way. I mean, the way he's arguing and reasoning this shows a man of great intellect. Towards the end of that speech, it's a very touching, sensitive, loving and romantic side. We're expecting the black ram and the devil. Well, actually, he says this, "But that I love the gentle Desdemona. I would not my unhoused free condition put into circumscription and confine for the sea's worth." Okay, I mean, look at that. Fantastic language to use. So he's not at all. He's actually a romantic. He's actually a lover. Totally different to what we were perhaps expecting. And then later on, when he's speaking to the court, he reveals quite a lot about his character, and he becomes a romantic storyteller. The court are asking him for his evidence about whether this is true love with Desdemona, and he says this: Her father loved me, oft invited me, still questioned me the story of my life. From year to year, the battles, sieges, fortunes that I have passed, I ran it through, even from my boyish days, to the very moment that he bade me tell it, wherein I spake of most disastrous chances, of moving accidents by flood and field, of hairbreadth scrapes, the imminent deadly breach, of being taken by the insolent foe, and sold to slavery, my redemption thence, importance in my travels history. I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic speech. I mean, he's been anecdotal, it's captivating, it's full of imagery, it's full of kind of dense description, it's full of dramatic alliteration. Quite clearly, you know, this is a guy under pressure. Remember, if he doesn't sell himself well, he's probably going to be put to death. But it's a compelling, persuasive speech. And ultimately, you know, Othello's a brilliant politician here. Do not be fooled, because we feel sympathy for him as the Duke's court would feel sympathy for him. You know, we hear about him being sold to slavery, about his redemption. This guy's clearly been around the mill quite a lot, and we feel sympathy for him. And he convinces us that actually his love for Desdemona holds weight. Let's move on with Romeo and Juliet, though. Outside of the ball, we meet Mercutio, fascinating character, a character. So I'm just going to have a slurp of coffee. Do excuse me. A fascinating character that actually has almost transcended the play Romeo and Juliet. But he's trying to get Romeo ready for a party. You know, Romeo's very flat. He's numb. He's morose, as we've already looked at. He's trying to get him ready. And look what Romeo says. He says, "Give me a torch. I am not for this ambling. Being but heavy, I will bear the light." I mean, what a killjoy. You know, they're about to go and storm the Capulets' party. You know, it's daring. It's kind of, you know, boyish kind of antics. And he says, basically, look, I'll just carry the light. I'm not for this ambling. He doesn't see it as important. Being but heavy, I will bear the light. That's all I do. I'll just carry the torch for you chaps. Okay? Again, he's isolating himself. He's saying that he doesn't want to be a part of it. And the contrast between Mercutio and Romeo's character is massive. Look at Mercutio's language. "Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance." Look at him. He's persuasive. He's compelling. That word dance, you know, think about the implications of the word dance. Does he mean dance, or does he want Romeo to do something else? What does a dance represent? Look how he tries to define Romeo's character. "You're a lover, borrow Cupid's wings and soar above them with a common bound." He uses kind of classical imagery there. He uses kind of ornate imagery to try and convince Romeo. "If thou art done, we'll draw thee from the mire." Uses figurative language. Okay, it's just well-rounded language here. "If it be rough with you, be rough with love." Being playful with language. "Come, we burn daylight, ho!" He's not having any nonsense, Mercutio. He wants to get on with it. You know, he's a spontaneous character. I think he's a hedonistic character. And his language is poetic, playful, entertaining, provocative. He uses imagery, humour, sexual inference, left, right and centre. And interestingly, if we move on now to slide 17, when Romeo meets Juliet, I would suggest to you his language changes, and I think his language becomes more like Mercutio's. And look what he does. Look at the stage directions now on slide 18. You know, Romeo taking Juliet's hand. Look at that. He is in control. You know, beforehand we had this kind of passive nothing of a man, didn't we? Now we have this man who's taking, quite literally, his life in his own hands. "If I prevail with my unworthiest hand to this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." He is a romantic. He's audacious. He becomes poetic, spontaneous, passionate and forward. And I think he sounds exactly like Mercutio. So he changes. It's a huge change. And we see this with Romeo. This is his downfall. It's not a slight change. It's an unrecognisable change. He goes from being one type of character to being a total opposite. And you can see through that sonnet that Romeo and Juliet speak together there. you can see how playful he becomes, how he starts to use kind of poetic, densely rich and ornate language. Lots of close analysis for you to do there. It's unbelievable, really. And let's move on to slide 19. And this is the one soliloquy that I'd like you to look at. And soliloquies are vital, absolutely vital in Othello, because what happens is we see Othello change, or we see his changes is foreshadowed. We expect it to happen. In the same way that the prologue it tells us things are going to happen, Iago's soliloquies are absolutely vital. And he says this, let's see, after some time to abuse Othello's ear that he, Michael Cassio, is too familiar with his wife. So he tells us what's going to happen. And that phrase, abuse Othello's ear, suggests that Othello's ear can be abused, suggests that Othello can be manipulated. Iago's seen a weakness and a way to change him, and it's particularly interesting there. He also says, and will as tenderly be led by the nose as asses are. Look, he's calling Othello a donkey. It's going to be easy to do. He's just an animal. And actually, this is the time where we start to question Othello's nobility. And he says this as well: the Moor is of free and open nature. We haven't seen that yet, but this foreshadows it. We start to think, could this man change? That is vital, absolutely vital. Similar dramatic technique to the prologue. So I've put 4 little boxes on here for you. The foreshadowing of Othello's character change seems far-fetched at this point in the play. The foreshadowing of Othello's character change creates suspense and tension. The foreshadowing of Othello's character change seems illogical and would be drastic and dramatic. The foreshadowing of Othello's character change seems believable. I'll see what you think about that. So if we go on to slide 21, going down this line of drastic character change, we're going to look at this bit with Romeo and Tybalt. Tybalt wants a fight. He wants a duel. Romeo's just married his cousin, so for very obvious reasons he doesn't want to fight him. Romeo says this: Tybalt, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. Villain am I none, therefore farewell. I see thou knowest me not. He's trying to pacify him. He's trying to be a peacemaker. Tybalt's having none of it. Great character. Boy, this shall not excuse the injuries that thou hast done me. Therefore turn and draw. And again, Romeo tries to pacify him. So here he's being a peacemaker. He's being passive. He's trying to be friendly, for want of a better word. And then once Tybalt has killed Mercutio, again we see this absolutely huge change in his character. I mean, it's absolutely massive. And Romeo just becomes full of anger. He is volatile. Away in triumph from Mercutio slain. Away to heaven respective lenity and fire-eyed fury be my conduct now. Now, Tybalt, take the villain back again. That lake thou gavest me for Mercutio's soul is but little way above our heads, staying for thine to keep in company. Either thou or I or both must go with him. Brilliant. Look how Romeo, he kind of admits he's doing a character change. He says, away to heaven respective lenity. So, any restraint that I had, that's gone. And fire-eyed fury be my conduct now. Look at the emphasis or the alliteration on fire and fury there. Those 2 words, again, would associate with hell. So he's saying, get away with all things good, I'm going to be evil. This is what he's saying. It's actually a statement from Romeo. I'm going to be evil now. And then when Tybalt comes in, he takes him on, finger-pointing, looking him in the eyes. Now, Tybalt, take the villain back again. And takes him on. Massive change. Hot-headed, murderous, spontaneous, vengeful. Arguably, if this didn't happen, Romeo would have survived. But he's got this part of his character where he just... That was me clicking my fingers, I don't know if you heard that. Do it again. This is where he changes. Massive. Massive change. Mercurial change. And Othello's changes is almost as bizarre. He's a noble, intelligent guy. He's a general, held in high regard by everyone. Basically the future of Venice hangs on Othello when they're fighting against the Turks. And Iago does his famous speech, "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. that cuckold lives in bliss, who, certain of his fate, loves not his wronger. But oh, what damned minutes tells he, who dotes, yet doubts, suspects, yet strongly loves. And Othello, oh misery. So, you know, Iago's speech has worked. And look at that emotional outburst from Othello. I want you to focus on that 2 words. Easy manipulation. It's an emotive response. It's irrational. It's out of character. It's rash. Totally different to what we expected. You know, it becomes kind of melodramatic. And this idea about jealousy, he is jealous. It's been unlocked. And all of a sudden, bang, we have a totally different Othello. If we go up to slide 24, very similar to Romeo here. This is where Othello makes a statement about how he's going to change. I had been happy if the general camp piners and all had tasted her sweet body, so I'd nothing known. Oh, now for ever, farewell the tranquil mind, farewell content, farewell the plumed troop and the big wars that make ambition virtue. Oh, farewell, farewell the neighing steed and the shrill whatever. You know, he goes on and on. He starts to annoy me at this point. But remember, in Othello's time, if in Shakespeare's time, if you were cuckolded, then you know, if you couldn't control your wife, for want of a better word, then you know you lost all respect. But that repetition of farewell, it's melodramatic, it's out of character, and he says goodbye to something, and I think he's saying goodbye to his past character, and then at the end he starts to sound really aggressive. He says to Iago, "Villain, be sure thou prove my love a whore." You know, aggressive, confrontational language. Okay, he says, "Give me the ocular proof, I need to know it." But he's getting someone else to do the work for him. He's reliant on Iago. We haven't seen that in Othello yet. So moving on to what Juliet says. Now you've got to feel slightly sorry for Juliet, obviously, well, because she dies to begin with. But also because the first act that her new husband does is kill her cousin. Not the grounds for a great wedding, particularly. But look at her confusion. Oh, serpent heart, hid with a flowering face, did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? She doesn't quite know what to think about it. And she's totally confused. I mean, this guy on the one hand is, is a beautiful guy, you know, in her mind, but also he's a tyrant, fiend angelical. He's got this wonderful quality, but also he's got this villainous quality. So I want you to spend a bit of time looking at the implications of her language there, and again, we've got those contrasting words that happen there. And in terms of what other people say about character change, in Othello, Lodovico, really, really important. Remember, he comes to Cyprus later on from Venice, and he reminds us how much Othello has changed. He says this: "Is this the noble Moor, whom our full senate call all in all sufficient? Is this the nature whose passion could not shake, whose solid virtue the shot of accident nor dart of chance could neither graze nor pierce?" So he reminds the audience how far removed Othello is from his original person. He's changed massively. And Lodovico reminds us, Lodovico, I'm not quite sure, apologies, people who can speak Italian. And at the end, Othello returns to his former self. Very sad indeed. He realised what's happened. He says this: "Soft you a word or two before you go. I've done the state some service and they know it." So he returns to that calm, confident, assured. He says, "Look, I've done the state some service. I've been a good Venetian. You need to listen to me." Absolutely fascinating. Okay, and he changes. He changes quite a lot. He says, "Of one that loved not wisely, but too well. Of one not easily jealous, but being wrought, perplexed in the extreme." That word "wrought," this is him admitting how easily changed he was. You hear about the word wrought iron. It's something that can be bent quite a lot, and that's really important. So he returns to his former self, but also he comments on how much he's changed. And I call that a realization. Something that Romeo does not have. Okay, absolutely. Okay, so there's just a few things before I finish, really, just in terms of linking your ideas. Think about your topic sentences for this. Is the first one. Think about both characters are unlike our initial expectations. There's a change from our expectations. We expect Romeo to be part of the brawl, and he's not. We expect Othello to be a villain, and he's not. Think about how that is shown. Think about how both characters' actions change. They do different things. Think about how both characters' change causes death and destruction. Think about how both characters change due to the influence of someone else. Think about Mercutio. Think about Tybalt. Think about Iago. Think about the fact that both characters' language changes dramatically. Look at language. That's the way to do very well in this assessment. And look at the fact that both characters' change is foreshadowed in some way. But there's other ways you can link those particular ideas, absolutely. And then there's three things I want you to focus on. Make sure you comment on language, comment on dramatic devices, and comment on context. Okay, so very good luck in the assessment. There's a masterclass on this Friday. I hope to see you there. If you'd like any more help with it, do let me know, and we'll speak soon. All the very best.